forum. I'm going to give us a few more minutes to let people join. We had a lot of interest for this webinar, so I'm watching the numbers tick up, and we'll start in about a minute or so. I'll just give it another 30 seconds as people are dialing in. See the numbers ticking up quite a bit. It's exciting. Well, everybody, welcome to the first GridWise Forum of 2025. For those of you who are not familiar with GridWise Alliance, we are a membership organization of utilities from around the country and all business models. We have IOUs, public power, and rural co-ops. We have a couple of the transmission operators. We have national labs. We have grid equipment manufacturers and vendors, technology solution providers, and consultants who are working with utilities. And our mission is to support grid modernization by developing materials that educate stakeholders on the values and benefits of making investments in grid modernization. I know that this topic today, which is meeting the challenge of energy demand, is something that people are talking about all around the country. And we are tackling this conversation in a number of ways, one of which is through conversations that started in our annual meeting, our conference called Grid Connects, which we had in December. And we had this panel here, the same folks at that in-person meeting, talking about the design and implementation challenges of meeting increased energy demand. And what I love about this panel is that it's got a range of people coming at this issue of meeting energy demand from a lot of different viewpoints, from how you design data centers to how the utility has to work with the large customers in order to meet that demand. So without further ado, I am going to turn this panel over to our moderator, Nick Jefferson, and let her introduce the panel and take things on. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to, if you've got questions, please use the chat function, and we will be addressing Q&A at the end of the, we'll have about 15 minutes of discussion at the end. So please do either use the chat function or the Q&A function, and we'll be monitoring those and make sure that we can address them all at the end of the panel. So thank you for joining, and Nick, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Karen. So again, welcome. It's my pleasure to serve as the moderator for today's GridWise Forum panel entitled Meeting the Challenges of Load Growth, Site Design, Build, Power, and Operate. Today's panel will delve into the multifaceted challenges and opportunities associated with AI data centers. AI-driven technologies, we know, are poised for significant future economic growth, but meeting the necessary load growth for AI data centers presents major challenges to utilities, requiring new innovation. Our panelists will discuss the strain on utilities to meet escalating load growth, operational hurdles in maintaining efficiency and security, the complexities of designing, owning, and operating AI data centers, and the significant policy impacts shaping the industry. As Karen mentioned, my name is Nick Jefferson. I'm the head of U.S. Government Affairs at Dell Technologies. At Dell, we adopt an end-to-end sustainability approach, designing energy-efficient portfolios and offering solutions for sustainable data center practices. That includes energy-efficient hardware with more sustainable cooling innovations, managing software insights, and responsible system retirement. Relevant to this discussion today, we don't see digital transformation and sustainable transition as an either-or decision. To help AI's impact or manage that impact, we believe our customers should transition towards sustainable data center solutions, which includes implementing energy-efficient hardware configurations and environmentally responsible cooling methods, leveraging insights from management software tools, and practicing responsible retirement of older obsolete systems. So my team, specifically government affairs and others at Dell, are supporting policies with this and other infrastructure concerns in mind. But of course, Dell's is not the only perspective on these issues, certainly not by a long shot. Many people are talking about this. So I want to make sure that we now turn to our panelists to introduce themselves. Joining me today is Robert Wright, Vice President of Dominion Energy Strategic Partnerships, Kyle Trotter, Senior Manager of Resource Utilization at MISO, and Phil Fisher, a leader in data center mission critical solutions from Black and Veatch. So as Karen mentioned, represented here today, we have utilities, ISO, and design perspectives on data centers. Rob, if you don't mind, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about your role and the perspective you and your company are bringing to the discussion today?
Yeah, sure, Nick. And just to do a quick sound check, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Great.
So good afternoon. My name is Robbie Wright, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Dominion Energy. So here in Dominion, we serve about 2.8 million customers, and my organization has responsibility for managing the partnerships and the relationships with our largest customers. And so that looks like supporting those customers on topics related to rates, reliability, new service connections, any clean energy or carbon-free interest they may have, which is a big topic these days, as well as electrification efforts. And then within my organization, we have a standalone data center practice, and they have similar responsibilities working with our data center customers and our data center developers on a lot of those same topics. Those new service connections are really a big part of our interactions, as you can imagine, with data centers these days. So we also handle forecasting for data centers, the large loads that we're connecting and what we foresee to be connecting in the 5 to 15-year horizon. And we work with our economic development partners to support data center interest here in the Commonwealth. So glad to be part of the discussion today and looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Kyle, do you mind if we turn to you next?
Yeah, sure. You can hear me okay? Hi, Kyle Schroeder, Senior Manager of Resource Utilization at MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. So we have 15 states and Manitoba, Canada in our footprint, right in the middle of the country. About 45 million people in our footprint. Over 70,000 miles of transmission, over 50 transmission owning members, and a couple hundred non-TO members. So we kind of see both sides of the picture here, where we have folks, from companies like Phil's coming to us with questions about how to connect to the transmission system, to companies like Robbie's, telling us their challenges. So we kind of have a broad scope of interest in this topic. So happy to be here.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Phil.
Well, good day, everyone. Phil Fisher, Client Executive in Black and Veatch's data center practice, working with hyperscalers, co-location providers, investors, midstream gas, and other entities that are involved in the development operation of data centers. Black and Veatch is a 100-year-old company that traditionally is involved in different infrastructure, meaning doing things such as water treatment and delivery, things such as electric power generation, grid and transmission. And what we get to do, in addition to bringing together the design of data centers and the operation aspect, bring those aspects in terms of how that infrastructure connects them to be able to operate. So excited to be here today. We met back in December. Since then, it seems like so much has changed, but yet so much is different. We may have to do this quarterly to give people updates on how things go in terms of data centers, in terms of connecting them.
Well, I'm game if you're game, Phil. I mean, you're absolutely right. Obviously, we have a new, I'm thinking from the government affairs side, we have a new administration that has definitely prioritized a number of these issues from the infrastructure side. So there has certainly been a lot of change, and I think there's more to come, but all in the forward trajectory of, accelerating this very topic. So thank you all for those quick introductions. As we talked about, I have a few prepared questions, but we'll certainly leave time for audience Q&A as well. So first, let's address the challenges for utilities to meet load growth. These questions will be for all, but Robbie, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you again, given the utility connection. So what are the primary challenges utilities face in accommodating the rapid load growth driven by AI data centers, and how are you addressing these challenges?
Yeah, and so I'll start with maybe a little background just to try to give some perspective. And I think most folks know Virginia is home to the largest data center market in the world. We're just under 4 gigawatts of metered demand for data centers here in the Commonwealth in our footprint. And then behind that, we have about 5 gigawatts of contracts for construction. And so I'll call that highly certain additional load. And that's where customers have committed to taking on the cost should the project get canceled or not come to fruition. The customers are going to bear the cost there. So that's another 5 gigawatts. And then if you look beyond that, there's about another 26 gigawatts in the pipeline. And so that's a lot of different phases of preliminary review, conceptual design, preliminary engineering. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of that won't come to fruition, or some portion of that won't come to fruition. There's probably some duplicative requests in there where different companies and developers are competing for the similar data center capacity for the end user. But I think it really signals the strength of the pipeline for this load growth that we're seeing today and that we should expect to see, or we will see for the near future. So that's one maybe way to think about it, or one perspective. And another change we've seen, if you go back a few years, we were connecting data centers at the distribution level. So there may be some feeder extensions, feeder upgrades, think 10 megawatts, 30 megawatts of load. And that's changed. That's really flipped completely. These days, most requests for us are in the 100 to 300 megawatt range. And so those are a single building or a variety of buildings on a campus that require significant transmission line upgrades and extensions, new substations. And we even have some, call them gigawatt campuses, where there's multiples of gigawatts contemplated in a campus environment. And so just different solutions. So if you think about that, some of the key challenges, I mean, just overall, with the complexity and the size of the solutions, just the timeline of these projects is certainly challenging. There's more engineering needed. You have to contemplate interdependencies between projects and overlapping upgrades that are needed to ensure you're arriving at the most efficient solution to serve in the long term. New study methodologies are needed. Cluster studies are becoming fairly common with utilities to try to study these in batches or in clusters. So just the overall project timeline is one challenge. Some other things that tie into that: material lead times. We're the type of equipment that we need here to serve our customers, very similar to utilities having this same demand across the country. So I think that demand is really outpacing supply, which puts pressures on the lead times for the significant large material equipment. Power transformers and high voltage, medium voltage breakers come to mind there. So that's maybe one other area where we're seeing challenges. And we continue to work with vendors trying to secure production slots and looking at alternative designs and looking at adding additional vendors. And so, but at the end of the day, the material lead time is really a big challenge. Another more localized is permitting. So as we develop these large solutions and look to upgrade and expand transmission lines, typically you're crossing multiple communities, multiple municipalities. And so you're going to get engaged with a lot of different stakeholders on permitting and approvals and exceptions. So that's proving to be a long pole in the tent, so to speak. But that's something that we've done for a long time. Working with those types of stakeholders, working with our communities is something that is important, and we pride ourselves on that focus. But again, just the volume and the size of these projects really takes it to a whole nother level. And then maybe one last area in terms of challenges is just actually completing the work. So I'll touch on that a couple of different ways. One, you'll have limited resources, and this is not anything new, but just limited resources to complete the work that you're trying to get done. It's pushing us to look at new work methods. We've just recently completed, for the first time, an reconductor project on a 230 kV energized line, and so that's a first for us. But it's a different way of doing the work that was necessary to meet the project timeline. And then the idea of scheduling these outages. A lot of these projects require transmission or bulk system outages. So scheduling those outages with the TOs, the transmission operators, just is proven to be another challenge here. So there's just some challenges to get our conversation started.
And of course, I open to everyone, but I think what's interesting is not only are you addressing new challenges, but also kind of the exacerbation of existing challenges just simply because of that demand. Well, I saw you came off mute.
Yeah, I was going to add to what Robbie had alluded to. When we look at data centers from 2010 to about 2020, they were less than 2% of the total U.S. electrical consumption. Today, they're at about 3%. And then suddenly now we're seeing the demand, the number of data centers, the scale of data centers change dramatically. So from folks like Robbie at the serving level, from Kyle and MISO that are sitting there at the system planning level and insurance of delivery, they're looking now at something that's projected to 8% by 2030. So it's becoming extremely relevant. To Robbie's mention, when data centers were fairly small, tens of megawatts in size, or maybe even 100 megawatts in size, they were large but not super substantial in terms of impacts. Today, when you think of a data center, it's not a single building, it's a campus of multiple buildings. And for the most part, we're seeing headlines about multi-gigawatt planning, which is something that is stressing capacity, both in terms of generation and delivery. And it's causing data centers and the stakeholders, such as the transmission authorities and the electric utilities, to think differently and think collaboratively.
Thank you, Phil. I mean, I'm sure that there are probably a whole host of challenges if we had all the time in the world that we could keep listing all of them out. I'm going to bring up one more, which is obviously kind of the question in the debate about the source of energy and sustainable efforts, and how utilities are balancing the need for infrastructure investment with that demand for sustainable energy solutions.
Yeah, and I can jump in just to get it started. And it's our message is simple. We have an obligation to serve, and we know that the focus on clean energy, that transition is real and it's occurring. Here in Virginia, we have targets and we have statutes that drive us towards that, and I think that's pretty common in the industry across the country. So, we say it's really, in order to meet the demand, and that's both the size and the speed, it's really going to take all of the above. That's kind of the short version. We need more of all types of generation sources. And if you look at our most recent IRP filed last fall, you'll see that an increase in sources, all source types across the board. It's about 80% clean energy versus 20% traditional thermal sources. But we really can't afford to exclude any. And so for us, We've got a 2.6 gigawatt offshore wind farm that is about 50% complete. It's expected to start going online in 2026. And so we would say the fastest way to 2.6 gigawatts is to finish that offshore wind farm. And we also continue to add solar to our utility scale solar fleet. And we also have CPCNs in front of our regulators for natural gas generation. So it really is going to take, in the near term, it's going to take all of those. Natural gas is probably quickest to installation, to turbines producing. But we really need all of those. And then I think if you look further down the road, new technologies like small modular reactors and long duration energy storage will be pieces of the overall mix.
Yeah, Nick, I'll jump in here too. I think you can't have a conversation about these large data center loads without talking about kind of the generation side of things, right? A lot of the challenges that we've already talked about with respect to these loads are also being faced by the generation side. We have, I don't know what the latest number is, maybe 50 gigawatts of generation that's made it through MISO's interconnection queue, but are not coming online yet due to, whether it's permitting issues or supply chain issues, the same things that were mentioned already. And so, yeah, from our perspective, we definitely also want all of the above. We just want new generation to come online. We really don't care what type it is or where it is. Our queue backlog is several years deep at this point. And that's another challenge where, these loads can materialize much more quickly than generation can currently get through our interconnection queue. We're implementing all kinds of process improvement measures to try to speed up that process of generation interconnection. But fundamentally, it's still a separate process from transmission planning for load increases. Our long-term planning scenarios, this is looking out 20 years or so, we call them futures. They attempt to bookend kind of the low and high end of what the state of the system might look like in 20 years. We're having to go back and refresh those this year because of the rapid acceleration of load growth just in the past 2 to 3 years. And they're materializing all over our footprint. We have anywhere from 100 megawatt projects to gigawatt projects, all the way from Louisiana up to our northern states. So it's not isolated to a particular region in our footprint, but it is it's just been a challenge to get ahead of that, and a challenge for our states to get ahead of that as they're trying to develop the resource adequacy plans, right? So they want to ensure that they have enough capacity to serve their loads, and if you're dropping a 500 megawatt data center somewhere where they hadn't forecasted that, it could put a strain on their existing load commitments, right? And so they need a way to get generation online more quickly to serve that new load. And so a big focus of ours right now is to try to unlock that backlog of generation and even of load interconnections in some respects.
Great. Thank you. I mean, and I think you're beautifully threading into the next question that I have, which we've talked a lot about the challenges, but as we think about what are some of those solutions, what are the key considerations for companies looking to design and invest in and operate AI data centers? Like, as they are trying to face these challenges, where are they, considering their investment to potentially get ahead of some of these challenges? Anyone can answer. I would have directed it to Kyle, but I'll take Phil too. I think and Robbie.
I guess I'll start. Obviously, folks are out there looking at where these campuses are going to be located. Robbie described he's the epicenter in terms of where the largest number of data centers in the world are located. Obviously, we see Texas as number 2, and quickly areas that you did not necessarily predict become part of data center development. So you're looking at Ohio, Georgia, Arizona, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Louisiana. So different types of places that are there. And the challenge is these unforecasted large loads that come about, and how do you bring them online quickly? Data centers have optimized their reference designs to be able to construct them quickly using reference design for the core, the shell, and the infrastructure that serves it, meaning maybe substations and other types of things, but they need to be able to have access to power. So they've been working jointly with their utility partners to try to optimize location, but they've also turned to some of what Kyle alluded to with some of the generation. Where could you potentially co-locate in areas that generation might be coming online? So today, less than 10% of data centers are co-located, meaning either sleeved or directly fed, either front of the meter or behind the meter from a power plant. That's starting to potentially change, with those being symbiotic in terms of their relationships, but also working with their utility and their system operator partners, looking at potential bridge power. I think Kyle brought up very nicely, as well as Robbie, this transition that we're having. Thermal generation is still part of what our electrical system needs, in addition to other technologies, wind, solar, maybe hydrogen in the future. It could be nuclear. So you're looking at different things all collaborating to get the generation in the areas that are appropriate, and then potentially operating in data centers in ways that are beneficial to the system itself.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Phil. So, yeah, I mean, we have, I mentioned earlier, we have a separate process for generation planning and transmission planning. The co-located generation and load topic is another one of those that it's active right now in front of our stakeholders. We're talking about, how to better coordinate the two together when generation and load come together to MISO and want to connect, what mechanism might they have available to do that? MISO actually, this week we filed with FERC a proposed process that would allow, it's called the Expedited Resource Addition process, or ERAS. But it's intended to allow load serving entities and states the ability to bring to MISO, a project that is basically ready to go, and it's identified a need as far as load being served. But it allows them to come outside of the generation interconnection queue and go through a study process in a matter of 3 or 4 months, instead of 1, 2, 3 years plus. We'll see how FERC handles it. There have been some complaints about the concept of open access and that sort of thing. If you want the details, feel free to go read the filing. It's pretty interesting. But we're open to creative ideas, in general, of how to make things happen like that. So we're trying to serve both the states' resource adequacy needs, but also the load serving entities needs and the interconnection customer needs. So it's a really interesting challenge at the moment.
Yeah, and Kyle, I mean, you just hit on what sounds like a pretty key innovation there, right? Like, that's something that you all have thought through and recognize this is helping to solve that challenge. What are some other innovations for new cutting edge AI data centers that folks should be thinking about, or that you all are thinking about, ways to, again, innovatively solve these problems, et cetera?
I would be interested to know, more about flexibility in some of these data center demands, and if there's ability to shift some of that load between sites, because that could be beneficial when it comes to actually operating especially in real-time markets, if there's ability to shift demand based on prices and things like that. And that also, I guess that also gets back to what type of generation is serving the load. Does it need 24/7 base load generation, or can it be served by more intermittent sources of wind or solar and storage, or a combination of those? So that's something that's been of interest to us to see as these materialize, because a lot of them are still kind of in the at least in the MISO footprint, they're still kind of in the planning phases, coming through our annual transmission expansion plan process. So we haven't had a lot of operational experience with them yet, but it's something we're definitely watching.
Yeah, and just maybe add on a little bit to Kyle's comment about the flexible load. We do see a lot of interest from our perspective, a lot of interest in the industry to solve for that. So it's the idea that what does that load look like? What does the curtailment or the relief look like? And then what are the mechanics of being able to execute that? Is it day ahead notification, hour ahead? And then is there a rate, a tariff, a program, a utility program that enables that? And so that's an area in the industry we are participating in, and would look forward to continuing those discussions to find out how can we leverage that concept and turn it into something that produces value for the utilities, the customers, and the grid.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear this transition, the things that data center operators would never think of in terms of their operations, the always on, always available. But as we've seen this transition from on-prem to cloud, and cloud continues to grow, but quickly overtaken by AI demand, they're thinking about ways to operate data centers differently. Can they be able to work jointly in terms of the system, in terms of those hours that it is constrained? Can they move? Can they utilize some of their on-site resources to relieve grid strain and to be able to do things differently? So I think both the technology stack as well as the application is causing data centers to think about how they could collaborate in ways that would benefit not only themselves, but the system, and more importantly, the ratepayers that are there for the rest of the system without necessarily subsidizing those types of data centers.
Well, I am very excited because last time we were all together, I didn't get to ask any questions about regulatory or policy impacts. We ran out of time. We were doing such a great job of just kind of getting to know one another and really diving deep into those challenges. So I'm thrilled that I get the opportunity to get y'all's perspective on some of these regulatory pieces. And also, since we've been together, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we have had a change in the federal administration, right? President Trump has come in, and even before he came in, we saw a number of executive orders, late executive orders in the Biden administration that affected AI and AI infrastructure in particular. And so I am curious what you all think about kind of the current regulatory environment, the impact on the development and operation of AI data centers, and based on the trajectory we're seeing, especially under a very AI accelerating and forward-leaning administration from an infrastructure side on the Trump administration, how do you see potential future regulations changing the AI data landscape?
Yeah, I'll get us started. And I think when I think of policy and regulation, maybe I'll break it into two different buckets. The first is there's certainly a lot of interest and a lot of motivation to advance artificial intelligence. And so we want to be a trusted partner. We want to support the customers. And one of the things we see is with the characteristics of AI, maybe it's not as dependent on that tier one or prime market. And so the idea that data centers, we're seeing data center interest in a lot of areas that we had not historically seen. And Phil mentioned a few places that I think probably would resonate in that thought. So it really is the AI. It turns into a lot everywhere. It's really where is power available? Where do you have the resources, the space you need? And so we have a lot of interest and a lot of outreach through economic development along those lines. And so we welcome that, and we're happy to support that, provide the information and the support we can for the developers' interest there. The second kind of bucket, I would say, gets a lot of attention around cost recovery, cost allocation. How do these significant investments roll through your regulatory process? And that process that framework, I would say, has proven effective for a long time to allocate cost of service, rate making type concepts. But what's different is these connections, these loads are driving upgrades and additions, capacity, infrastructure investments like nothing we've ever seen before. And so taking time to ensure we're doing appropriate cost allocation, I think, is one area that is getting a lot of attention. You've seen utilities propose or move to more take or pay type contracts. And then for us, we've implemented, tightened up our contracting strategy through the engineering and construction process to ensure that we are sufficiently covering our broad customer base for any investments or any expenses we might incur if the project doesn't come to fruition. So that's kind of two areas that come to mind for me around this policy and regulatory framework.
And I should say, although I was leaning very heavily into the federal regulatory landscape, there's certainly a lot that's happening at the state level to also address this. So I didn't mean to pigeonhole us. So feel free to answer from both sides.
Nick, I hate to say this, but I could probably spend hours bending your ear about some of these topics. But I think both Kyle and Robbie hit it on the head. Some of the things around interconnection, we'd like to see more stake in the game for folks. There's a lot of people that are overfilling these queues and maybe artificially inflating things. So maybe different ways for large load interconnects. We'd also like to see some of exactly what both Robbie and Kyle mentioned in terms of tariffs. In terms of interruptible, can people be able to get them? And what is that approval process? Could it be expedited? Could you potentially use some of those on-site resources there, backup generation that's moved from diesel to clean burning natural gas and even renewables to be able to accommodate those number of hours and benefit the grid as well as the data center operators? Kyle mentioned a little bit about generation. How do you bring that online in different types of ways? So there's going to be things around that, whether it be air permitting or whether it be other types of areas for it. So we're definitely seeing this industry kind of look at things differently. And the great news is I don't think there's as much finger pointing. And if anything, it's been, we're all in this together and let's figure out how to get through the other side. Whereas, unfortunately, Robbie and Kyle can probably mention the number of times that no matter what happened, they always got blamed for it, whether it was undercooked steak or, something electrical in nature.
Kyle, right before we turn to you, because I just saw that you came off mute, we have about 5 minutes before we would head into audience Q&A. So I just want to encourage folks to go ahead and drop in the chat any questions that you might have for our panelists. this should give you a little bit of time to get those ginned up and drafted in just right. Kyle, let me turn it back over to you.
Yeah, just a quick note on, the topic of policy. So, MISO is largely at the mercy of the policies that are developed, whether it's in our states or by the federal government. So much so that we have our own dedicated policy planning team that is their full-time job is to monitor all of that and try to see how it might impact our future system. Personally for me, I'm most curious in seeing how the makeup of FERC shakes out. I think the current commissioner is his term is due to expire, I believe, later this summer. Don't quote me on that. Of course, I'm being recorded, but anyway, that's something to watch because it's whether it's 3-2 R versus D or D versus R, it can actually have a pretty large impact on some of the decisions they make that can impact interconnection and system planning.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for answering those premeditated questions. We do have several questions in the chat, so I'm going to just kind of go in the order that I'm seeing here. Hopefully we can get through at least 2 to 3. So first, let me start. We have somebody asking, data center companies, operators, investors, owners may be deep pocket entities. What kind of special considerations are in place for these companies as priority customers, and how they share additional costs of infrastructure, build, operate, and modernize relative to regular conventional customers? Anyone can jump in.
Maybe I'll jump in to help Robbie and Kyle. Data center operators, because of their scale, have really been focused on how to control access to getting their data centers online. And as such, based on system impact studies and other expedited things, they've been thinking differently. Can they be able to maybe move substations on premise to be able to absorb some of that cost themselves and to be able to expedite things. So I think they're really thinking about ways that they could be able to assist with it in the sense that they're looking at the way that they approach things. They're trying to figure out what things could they be able to take away that are either blockers or things that might be construed as a cost that's passed down. So maybe those system impact studies have quicker payments or schedules for them to accommodate specifically their development. But it's a challenge with the sort of causation analysis that is there without having certainty about what things go forward.
Yeah, and I would say from a utility perspective, there are ways we can work with the customers to expedite or streamline different activities. So a customer providing on-site land for a substation is valuable. And so that there are ways to partner and be efficient. I think also things we can do to really try to weed out speculative inquiries that may be in the pipeline and may be slowing things down. And so we always want to keep an eye on that. At the end of the day, we don't, as a utility, we don't want to pick winners or losers between the data centers and the different customers and developers. We're going to want to be equitable across the board, but certainly having phase gates and requirements along the process could help, could add value. I think there was another aspect on kind of cost allocation, and I would go back to my previous comments. The regulatory, the rate making process that's been in place for a long time, I think has proven to be effective. We just need to continue to watch to ensure that these types of loads, the characteristics of these loads, the size of the loads, that it's still being effective. And should be kind of an ongoing review, an ongoing process. To maybe there are tweaks and changes to the rate making process, to tariffs, that ensure that these loads are really carrying their cost responsibilities.
Well, we have another question in the chat. Actually, we have a couple relating to hyperscalers. First being, will hyperscalers have to become co-locators with generation, either their own generation or partnering or collaborating with others?
Maybe I'll jump in. Hyperscalers tend to build the largest data centers, the most dense data centers. Nick, you and your team at Dell have seen the dramatic changes that technology has brought about as far as the chips are concerned. 10 kilowatts per rack to what's about 120. And then NVIDIA at their most recent conference had indicated that there's a path to 600 kilowatts per rack, which is astonishing in terms of that. One of the things that they did announce, which will make both Robbie and Kyle happy, is they're realizing that the load profile of those NVIDIA chips, as far as AI is concerned, is impacting potentially negatively on the data center itself and the utilities in terms of those impulse loads. So they have committed to taking some actions that would minimize at the chip level as far as that profile. But where I'm going with that is that these data center campuses are not going to be 200 megawatts. They're going to be several gigawatts in size. And if they're going to be able to achieve that, they're going to have to work collaboratively with the utilities, the independent power producers, the other entities, in terms of what would be the all of the above resources to potentially generate power and to potentially transmit it. It's not easy to be able to take on reconductoring or new transmission lines. It's not easy for new distribution lines. Robbie mentioned supply chain and a host of other things. The way that you could collaborate with that is find the easier paths to be able to put generation, consumption, and delivery in the right areas. And how that plays out in terms of what the contractual agreements are will be a little bit different, but it's abundantly clear that you have to look at how the parties are impacted and then the non-stakeholders, meaning the other people are impacted, the community, the ratepayers, and others that are involved. So I think it's both daunting in terms of what we need to get done and exciting that these things are going to happen in terms of what's there. And it's not only the way we look only at the hyperscalers. There'll be other data centers that are used in different ways, whether they're co-location facilities or others that are there. So I think it starts to set the trend or a different approach.
Excellent. Well, I have another hyperscaler question, and this doubles down a little bit on the conversation we were having about renewables and sustainability and generation of power. The question is, with time to power seeming to be critical for hyperscalers, will we simply see a dash for gas to meet the demands? And how does that get squared away with reporting emissions and objectives?
Yeah, and I'll start us off. From a utility perspective here in Virginia, administration change at the federal level. Those are still in place.
A little bit.
Let me try to go off camera. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, go for it.
Sorry about that. So here in Virginia, we still have clean energy targets, and we're going to continue to pursue those, even with the change that you've seen at the federal level. But that doesn't mean we don't recognize the value and the importance of the natural gas type solutions, especially when you think of the speed to market, the speed to resource generating electricity. So it really is all of the above, as I said earlier. I think long term, small modular reactors and other new technologies, hydrogen, we'll see how those develop and what role they can play and when they can play. We're here in Virginia. We are trying to advance SMRs with a nuclear site that we had in play for a potential traditional reactor. And so, yeah, really a lot of focus in that area as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to obviously what Robbie is saying. The energy transition is not easy per se. That we're seeing the need for thermal generation as well as other technologies, wind, solar, hydrogen, nuclear. My company happens to be involved in both building power plants that are for the utilities or grid as well as IPPs, as well as working with these entities that are looking at maybe self-generation. And I think we've seen this transition, say, from thermal generation backed by coal to cleaner fuels themselves, but also looking at what's next. Is there a blend that goes with that natural gas, maybe from hydrogen, from renewable sources? Can you be able to get to areas that maybe hydrogen is the primary source? There's the key question about carbon sequester. Is there the ability to be able to mitigate some of those in certain areas? And then how do we get to that next generation of on-site nuclear using maybe modular reactor technologies that are faster to market and done in different ways in terms of their scale and the different costs to be able to build them. So I think it's an exciting time. And while there is an abundant need for more generation, the question is, how can you be able to accommodate that in terms of the amount we need, the number of hours we need it? So how do you make it dispatchable and firm? And how do you accommodate it for the number of years that is required? Because we've seen a change on the electric grid from what was flat to now quickly rising. And data centers are one of the many inputs to it. There's industrial manufacturing, electrification, and just, economic growth that has caused these upticks on the demand for electricity, not just in the US, but globally.
Great. Actually, this goes into a really nice question that we have in front of us as well. So how does the growth of data center load versus EVs, green H2 loads, all of the things you just mentioned, how does that compare? And how is AI helping or hampering the data center load growth development and management?
I would say it's a funny circular loop. AI can solve a lot of things quickly. So these models can be able to compute and solve various problems, and they are being applied to engineering and siting and other things like that. And we are getting more out of, so-called less. And Nick, the Dell team obviously knows about that in terms of what you can do because of the technology and how that is happening in terms of the amount of compute and the amount of overhead. We've seen the amount of power usage effectiveness, the power that goes to the work done by the chips compared to the infrastructure, meaning the cooling and the redundancy that is there. We've also seen some change in the way that maybe the chips are designed. You used to have to provision the loads, which probably drives MISO and Kyle crazy, Robbie and Dominion and every other utility, that you need to build at 1.3 to 1.5 of what your actual load is to accommodate some of the IT. So I think that AI is causing a problem, solving a problem. It's also adding to these other types of, options that are out there. And as we see what the use cases and the patterns are, I think that the ecosystem around it is going to collaboratively change.
Well, I know we have about 5 minutes left. I want to ask one last question because there's a question in the chat that we didn't really touch on heavily. And so I'd love the panelists' perspective here. What concerns and challenges do you foresee regarding cybersecurity in such centralized digital information and data centers?
Yeah, so from a utility perspective, especially in Virginia, we serve a lot of high profile and kind of critical defense, national defense type facilities. Cybersecurity is a top priority, and we, I think, like a lot of utilities, you probably heard the phrase defense in layers, and so that's an important part of our approach. We also work closely with other entities, other interests to stay abreast of what's going on, what emergent threats might be out there. It's certainly evolving quickly, and I think AI can probably serve to even expedite that evolution on the threat, but also maybe as part of the solution or part of the tools that we would use to defend. So really top priority, always changing and kind of working with other interested parties and agencies to ensure that we're aware and sharing information between them to make sure we're protecting our grid and our customers, and then also helping protect the public at large.
Yeah, and I think it's a interesting question, Nick. Obviously data centers have always protected their data center, the data that is on the different storage devices, the computing devices from that nefarious type of activity. But as data centers have become more automated as far as their subsystems, the power, the cooling, the other aspects of it, that has then opened that potential to potential cybersecurity, much like Robbie described with automation of our power grid or any type of environment, water environment or other things. You're looking at now you need to defend against those in layers. So data center operators are looking at a holistic type approach, whether it is the cooling systems, the backup generators, their medium voltage distribution to low voltage distribution, just like they have always used gatehouses and other entry to it. They're doing the same with all of those different pieces to protect not only the data, but the things that would run it that would prevent you from using your data center for the things that you want to.
Excellent. Well, I think Karen has just come back on screen. So I think that is all the time we have. I personally just want to, as moderator, thank panelists for joining me again. I didn't have the opportunity last time to scribble down notes the way that I did here virtually. So I know I learned something, even though we've done this panel together before. So Karen, let me turn it over to you to close us out.
Well, thank you, Nick, for leading a great panel again. And a couple things for our listeners. We talked a lot about load flexibility, and we just at our GridWise Technology Council meeting had 2 presenters from Duke University, Nicholas Institute, who have just released a study on the load flexibility of data centers. And if you are a GridWise member, that recording will become available to you in the next couple days. And we are also forming a working group to look at the characteristics of load, not just data centers, but load across the customer scale, to really understand what are the flexibility characteristics, the resilience characteristics, the power quality needs, so that we as advocates for grid modernization can really understand the kinds of resources that we have in our hands with these different kinds of load, but also the changing nature of that load and how grid operators and owners and developers of generation can help meet those load characteristics. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for joining. And Glenn, and I see you're here. Is there anything that you would like to say as we close out?
Yeah, no, just to look out for the recording of the webinar from yesterday. The Technology Council will be included in the portal within the next day, and then we'll try to get the slides in there too. And as far as the load working group, we will be sending out a form for folks to fill out if they're interested, so we can start to collect those names and we can get that working group launched.
Thank you, everybody. See you in a couple months for the next GridWise forum.
Thank you.